Welcome to the sixth in a series of interviews with candidates to replace Representative Niki Tsongas in the U.S. House of Representatives. I'm Peggy Wargelin, a member of Concord Citizens Protecting Progress. Today we welcome Juana Matias, State Representative for the 16th Essex District. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure to be here, Peggy.
Sure. Most of the questions will be about your knowledge and philosophy of government, as well as your strategies for making decisions. We'll end with a lightning round asking you to quickly comment about other issues important to our members. Let's start with a 2-minute biography. What would you like voters to know about you?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So my name is Juana Matias. I'm a state representative for the 16th Essex District. A little bit about my background. I came to this country as an immigrant at the age of 5 in 1992 with my family and saw both of my parents take on factory jobs, earning minimum wages their entire lives, and this gave me an opportunity to go on to college and then law school, always returning back to the Congressional district that welcomed my family and gave us an opportunity to achieve our American dreams. I was a social worker after my UMass Boston days, and then upon finishing law school, I completed my second national service year as an AmeriCorps. And I was a Justice AmeriCorps and defended unaccompanied minors who were facing deportation, predominantly doing asylum work. I believe in public service. I believe that if we elect servant leaders, people who fundamentally understand that you're here to impact people's lives for the better, that we can actually get our country moving in the right direction. And I'm honored to be part of a very diverse group of people who are running for Congress and hoping to, be an unapologetic progressive leader for the 3rd District, for the working class families who are continuing to struggle to get by.
Cool. The first group of questions asks about your opinions about the federal government. What types of programs should the federal government be responsible for?
I think, we need to ensure that we are providing the funding that's necessary so that people have access to a quality education. So what are we doing to make sure that we're expanding early childhood education, expanding resources to Head Start programs? What are we doing to make sure that in this country, anyone who works 40 hours a week does not continue to live in poverty? I've said time and time again throughout the campaign trail, we've seen in the last 40 years productivity in this country go up by 70% and wages only have gone up by 10%. So we have a real issue and we need to make sure that we're not leaving people behind. We need to make sure that we're putting people over politics. So it's about giving people access also to quality, affordable health care. I saw in 2013 my father be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and I remember being at different appointments with my family, and a constant worry for us was, how are we going to afford this treatment or that treatment? We were lucky that we were in Massachusetts where we had access to Mass Health. So to me, that's a critically important issue. What are we doing as a country to ensure that we're getting towards a single-payer healthcare system? And I think we need to be electing people who are not just going to talk about these issues, but are going to prove it with their actions and are going to be unapologetic about driving us where we need to be.
Sure. Let's see. Describe one program run by the federal government you feel is especially successful and effective, and explain why you think that is so.
That's effective. Currently, I feel like we have an administration and a president that's really driving us backwards. We're not doing what we need to be doing with climate change. We just saw Scott Pruitt be removed because of ethical wrongdoings. We continue not to have people leading that agency that understanding that climate change is real and that we need to be making investment. We are continuing to see our administration invest less and less in renewable housing and affordable housing measures. So I think we have a president and administration right now that is undoing a lot of the incredible work we've done in the past and are just really moving us in the right direction. So as of now, I don't think there's anything that we're doing effectively. We have DeVos leading our education system and really trying to privatize education when that should not be what we should be talking about. We should be talking about making sure that every child, regardless of where they live, are getting a quality education and the ability to reach their academic potential. We should be talking about how do we ensure that people who want to go to college, who are willing to work hard, have access to that without having to indebt themselves for their entire lives. And all of these issues are really personal to me. They're not theoretical because I've lived them. I've gone to college and I will have decades and decades of debt, and I don't think that should be the cost of attaining an education. So I think we're currently in a time that we've never found ourselves in, and we're seeing this president, spew hate, divisiveness, and we also have people who are leading agencies that are critical to the improvement of working class families that aren't doing what they need to be doing.
Sure. Let's see. Now describe a federal program you feel is not successful. What improvements would you suggest?
There are many, and I think I was just mentioning some of them, right? So we have DeVos leading education, and that's not who we should have at the helm of that agency. You know, we just saw what happened with Scott Pruitt. I'm hoping that, you know, I don't believe we have a president who doesn't believe in climate change. So, you know, I don't think that we're going to see the improvements we need to, and we've rolled back many Obama-era environmental protections when we should be investing in other renewable resources like wind and solar and electric cars, improving our infrastructure and our transportation systems. So I think currently there are a lot of agencies and, you know, and the administration as a whole and Congress as a whole who are being really ineffective and aren't being a voice for people and aren't really addressing the issues that people are facing.
Sure. When is it appropriate to make use of private sector resources like outsourcing and public-private partnerships for government functions?
I think that, you know, one of the areas that I've seen in the State House where we've done this in a way that really works, and we've made partnerships with small local businesses in order to create economic growth has been really helpful. So we're currently using state funds, the Office of Secretary Rosalina Costa Workforce, and she's been partnering with small local businesses and giving them grant money. And with this grant money, they're able to train new workers who wouldn't have access to this job. And so we're helping the small business grow, but then we're also helping these individuals that live in our district who don't have access to a meaningful wage be able to obtain that. So I think that is a great way to, you know, come together and collaborate and both spur economic growth with small businesses, but ensure that we're giving people in our communities access to good employment. And I've seen that in a couple different ways. And I think that it would be great that the federal government also, you know, implement these kinds of initiatives, and it works well.
Excellent. What federal government programs have you or members of your extended family benefited from?
Interesting question. You know, my mom currently receives Social Security and Medicare. And I've talked about this in the campaign trail, and she receives about $700 a month. Not enough money to pay the rent, keep the lights on, and put food on the table. And so we have these programs that are great that are not entitlements. People were promised that if you worked hard in this country, you would have the ability, when you retired, to live with dignity and respect. And so for me, it's about protecting, strengthening, expanding access to these programs, not cutting them, because I see how my mom barely survives on it. And if it weren't for me and my three brothers to supplement her expenses, she could not survive on $700. So again, another way that all of these issues are really real to me. I've lived them. They've really shaped the way I look at the world. And they're going to give me the opportunity to never forget who I'm there to represent.
Sure. The next set of questions is about how you obtain and use information. What is a fact to you, and how are facts important in your decision making?
A fact is something that's been proven through data, and I think that whenever you're in a position of being a public servant, I think it's important that you're able to get well versed on an issue, that you talk to people who don't see eye to eye on a matter in the way that you do, and just really get comprehensive information. And I think it's important, and I've seen in the State House how, you know, I've passed legislation with my minority leader, Brad Jones, who's a Republican, and we don't agree on many issues and don't see eye to eye, but it's about how do you create, you know, bridges and work together with people you otherwise wouldn't work, and, you know, also understand that you're going to get a lot of information, and the measure of that information is how does this best affect my community? Is this in the best interest of my community? And that should always be what you're looking at and how you're determining your decisions.
Sure. Do you verify information provided to you?
Of course, I think it's crucially important. I think, you know, in the State House, you know, I've seen a lot of how people use rhetoric, and we start repeating something and it starts becoming a truth. And I think one of the things we need to do as a Democratic Party is create our narrative, not be so much on the defensive. And I think that we have a responsibility of when we see people disseminating misinformation in a respectful and informative way, having them understand, well, that's really not the way it works. And I think we have found ourselves a lot on the defensive, and it's about how do we create a narrative, how do we stick to that, and make sure we're driving our message.
Sure. And how do you decide what sources of information to trust?
So depends on what subject I'm looking at, right? I think we need to look for certified, reliable sources and journals that can demonstrate that, you know, this is accurate data, and always comparing that to other forms of information. There are a lot of sources of information available for research, and it's about doing your research yourself and figuring it out. So I went into the State House, and there had been an issue that happened in my community, and was not well versed on this whatsoever. There was a child that had gone missing, and I wanted to write legislation on this. So I contacted the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, who are researchers and experts on this matter and have national policies across the country, and worked very closely with them. And then I researched other forms of legislative proposals that were across the country, like California and New York, that already had legislation in the books. And then I worked with my law enforcement officials. So it's a combination of bringing different sources together, making sure that this information is certified and accurate.
Sure. How do you communicate with people who trust different information sources than you do?
You need to be open-minded, and you need to be open-minded and understand. What I went into public service, what I ultimately never forgot, is people didn't send me into public office to bicker and fight. People expect us to find common ground and solutions to the issues that are affecting them and their families. So I have found myself at many times in a room with people who say things that are not accurate, who say things that are hurtful, who say things that are disrespectful. And I think that it's about, how do you take that situation and shed light in a positive way that they may not be looking at this accurately. So I've been leading on the Safe Communities Act in the Massachusetts State House. It's a pro-immigrant piece of legislation in a time nationally where there could never be better circumstances for us as a state to say, these are our values. We believe immigrant families deserve to be treated with respect, and they're going to live here in safety, and they should never be concerned with calling their law enforcement official to report any crime and having these thought that they may be divided as a family. So, I've been in a room and I've contacted Republicans, I've contacted Democratic conservatives and moderates, and I've had conversations with them, and there are things that they say that sometimes are hurtful. And as an immigrant, a first-generation immigrant, what I like to do is shed my experience, get them to see it through a different lens, have them understand that this really is implicating people's lives. So a lot of what I got throughout this last year and a half was like, well, they're not really living in fear. It's Massachusetts, they're fine. And it's about, how do you bring in those stories? How do you expose them to the fact that there are women who are victims of domestic violence in the state and are fearing calling their police department in light of them thinking that maybe their child is going to be taken away because our police departments are collaborating with ICE. So I think it's always an opportunity to expose people to see things in a way that they may not have had awareness to. We come from different walks of life, education, experiences, and upbringing, and it's not losing that hope. It's not walking into the room and feeling, oh, well, I'm never going to accomplish this. It's about, no, it takes time, and it's about getting people to meet you where you are, and it's about, having patience. It's not going to happen overnight, and I think that's what I've learned in a very short time here in the State House.
Okay. Let's move on to the specific elected position you're running for. Why do you want to be the U.S. Representative for Massachusetts District 3?
So look, this is the district that gave me an opportunity to become the woman that I am today, that gave my parents access to jobs, that gave me access to a public education. And I've dedicated my entire career, from graduating from UMass Boston and then Suffolk Law School, to coming back to this district and opening the door for that person that's coming behind me, and using my education, using my energy, using my commitment to public service to somehow impact people's lives for the better. And for me, it's about continuing to do this work. I think that we find ourselves in a time where we really need unapologetic leaders, people who actually really understand what working class people are going through. I think one of the things that the Democratic Party has kind of swayed away from is the fact that, yes, we talk about being the party of the working class. We talk about all these incredible values, and then we elect people who have no idea what that's actually like, who haven't lived it. And I think we have a system that's broken, where those who come with a background of funds or a network of funding, or could be self-funders, are the ones that are being elected, when what we should really be looking at, are you a public servant? Do you really want to dedicate your life to making a difference in this district? And for me, from a very early age, I decided that I wanted to dedicate my life, my work, to ensuring that I was somehow addressing the inequities that I continue to see that exist. And this is an opportunity to continue to be a champion for people across this district and really be relentless in making sure that we're addressing the issues that are really affecting people. And I know what they're like because I come from a working class family. I continue to be a working class candidate. And like I've said before, if given the opportunity to represent this district, I will fight every single day to make the difference that we need to make.
How long have you lived in the district?
Since I came here. So in 1992, I arrived here. It was a wintry day at the age of 5 with me and my 3 siblings. I have never left, and every opportunity I've had after college and law school, I've always come back. And my commitment is to continue to be here and use my education and time to give back to this community that gave me the opportunity to be who I am today.
This is a very diverse district. How do you plan to represent the interests of people with such varying concerns and views of what government can and should do?
It is. And for me, it's been great to travel throughout the district because I've learned very quickly how different it is. I come from the community of Lawrence, where we have very specific issues, very urban, gateway community, and then there are other communities like Harvard and Acton and Concord. And so throughout this experience, you learn the differences that all of these communities have, and it's about how can you be responsive. And the way to be responsive is being present, making sure you have an incredible constituent services office, and making sure that the issues that you're advocating, that you're proposing policy for, really speak to everyone's needs. And that's what I hope to do. I think that if given the opportunity, it's really about also, making sure that you're accessible. When I ran for my position as a state representative, I always say you cannot be a voice for others if people don't have access to you as an advocate. So for me, that's a priority in making sure that people know that they can always reach out to me in my office and that we're here to be at service for them.
Sure. What concerns do you hear about from voters most often? What are the issues you're most concerned about personally?
So I think that the issues that I'm most concerned about personally, and also the issues that I hear most, are access to economic opportunity. So we've been on the campaign trail now for about 11 months, and that's been the top issue. I work and I want access to a meaningful wage, and we live in this country and I'm struggling to get by. Housing just continues to rise, and the money that I'm able to earn is barely enough to get by in terms of paying my housing, in terms of putting food on the table. So I think that's the biggest issue that I've heard on the campaign trail, is the issue that I care most about because I've lived it. So I remember, leaving high school and having 2 jobs, going to a nursing home for the morning shift, and then in the afternoon going to Subway, working multiple jobs to be able to get ready to go to college and to be able to afford college. And I see families day in and day out with multiple jobs just struggling to get by. So I think as a country, we have a commitment to figure out, how do we resolve this? How are we making sure people have access to a living wage? And so that would be my first issue. And then access to healthcare. I find it shameful that the richest country on earth can't get its act together when it comes to access to affordable healthcare. It should not be based on your privilege or ability to afford it. It should be based on your need. And that's what we need to get towards, and that's what I'll be fighting on behalf of.
Sure. Please tell us about how you're financing your campaign.
Yeah. So I think, as a woman, an immigrant, Latina, woman of color, it's been the biggest challenge, raising money. And I think it's one of the most disappointing things about the entire electoral process is seeing how we're not electing people who are public servants. We're not electing people who've demonstrated their public service record to this district, who are really committed to moving us forward. What we have across this country is we're electing people who have access to be able to raise money. You walk into meetings, you walk into speaking with organizations that get involved in this race, and the first question is, are you viable? And viability means, can you raise? It doesn't take into account anything else, and I think that's just really disheartening, and that's not what this system should be about. And until we change it, and until we get big money out of politics, all we're going to be doing is electing those who have access to funds and not necessarily those who are really committed to being of service to others. And it's something that I hope to change, and it's been extremely challenging. The money I've been able to raise has come from family, donors, within and outside the district. On the phone constantly. And when I rather be at the doors talking to voters and listening to them. So hopefully in the years to come, we can continue to fight to repeal Citizens United, put in a system that, supports the public financing of elections and get money out of politics. Because until we don't, we're not going to be getting the best candidates that really have our interests at hand.
Sure. Let's see. Oh, what are your criteria for accepting or declining contributions?
So usually the way that I've been able to fundraise is within the community, but I come from a very poor community, so limited funds. I've had an incredible group of people who are part of my finance committee that have been able to connect me to other people. I don't take any corporate PAC money whatsoever. I've been endorsed by Justice Democrats, and they endorse candidates who do not accept corporate PAC money. So my donations come from people who can give. And it's been very difficult to find those people because I'm also young and I don't have a network of funders, and I come from a family where my parents were earning minimum wages just years ago. So it's been very difficult, and I have a commitment to be a voice of people, and the way you can be a voice to people is getting money out of politics. So that's what I'm going to be advocating for if given the opportunity to represent this district.
Sure. National politics is increasingly marked by rancor and division, and dealing with this will be a large part of the job. Describe a past situation where you had to work to get something done with a group of people who strongly disagreed with your position.
I think that's been my entire experience at the State House, both with, the Safe Communities Act. I walked in and I had people from the very beginning say, Juana, you're a freshman legislature. Don't take on this very controversial topic, just go in there and build relationships and learn the system. And for me, I saw it as an obligation. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I come from a family of immigrants, and very quickly learned that it was going to be a tough issue. And Democratic Progressive Massachusetts, the Safe Communities Act was going to be a tough issue, and learned that leadership and members of the House weren't really supportive. So I started working with law enforcement officials. And we have a huge member coalition of organizations across the state who support the bill, over 150 organizations. And this whole idea of working with law enforcement wasn't really an idea people were excited about, but we needed to, figure out a way to get other people who weren't behind this bill on board. So over a year and a half of working together between an executive committee from the coalition and law enforcement, myself and Senator Eldridge, we were able to come to a compromise. It was not easy. It was, not everyone was happy at the end of the day, but I was able to bring people together that have never sat at the table to have discussions and find a way to find common ground, and at the end of the day, still bring protections to immigrants while listening to their concerns that may be very different from ours. And it was a difficult process, and I'm proud of the work we were able to do. I think we accomplished something. Unfortunately, you're never going to get everyone on the same page, but I think it's about getting people to understand it's, finding some form of consensus to actually bring results to the people that we represent. So I'm really proud of the work that I've done, and I've demonstrated, every opportunity I have, and I'm working on legislation, not just to work with those who are aligned with me, but reach out across the line. And, I was able to pass legislation with a Republican in the Massachusetts State House. And so it's about knowing when to work together with people and including those who don't see eye to eye with you, but finding a way to bring consensus.
Sure. What is your philosophy on legislative compromise?
So I think that's the question we were just talking about leads up to this question. And for me, there were certain values and things that I would not in any way negotiate when it came to the Safe Communities Act. So, making sure that racial profiling does not occur in the state, and that when you're stopped, you're not asked your legal status, was a provision that in no way, shape, or form I would be willing to negotiate. So I think when you walk into a room and you're trying to find common ground, you walk in there with your values. You walk in there with what it is that you're trying to accomplish for that, demographic that you're in there for. And yes, you try to find common ground, but you don't ever walk away from the things that are absolutely necessary. And that's who I am. I'm never going to walk into a room and say one thing and then another. No, this is what I stand for. This is what I'm going to fight for. And at times there are ways that you can find compromise, but I don't compromise my values.
Okay. Finally, let's touch quickly on some other issues important to our members. Please give a quick response to each issue.
Okay.
Women's right to choose.
Yes. Cannot roll that back. We've worked too hard for it.
Yes. Health care.
Yes. Access to health care, single-payer health care system.
Civil rights.
We need to do a lot more, especially when it comes to voting, and making sure we're expanding access to voting, especially a lot of communities of color are disenfranchised. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Okay. Net neutrality.
disappointing what we saw this administration do. I know that there are a couple measures that are trying to undo that, and we need to make sure that people have access. And I would be supportive of making that happen.
Okay. Gun regulations.
Beyond disappointing that this country continues to look at gun legislation as something we can't make happen. We continue to lose victim after victim. We continue to see community after community be scarred. And it's shameful that we continue to be silent and that those who should be representing us do nothing about it.
The latest round of tax cuts.
Is a handout to the top 1% and the biggest corporations at the expense of working class family and small businesses. And that shows you that this president and administration do not value working people and aren't willing to put us first.
Government policy for the situation in Puerto Rico.
I think that we have a history of treating Puerto Ricans as second citizens in this country, and I think we need strong, democratic, progressive public servants who are going to have policy proposals as to how do we get Puerto Rico back to where it needs to be, and how do we ensure that they have the same rights that citizens in this country have as well. These are U.S. citizens.
Yes. Immigration policy.
So much that needs to happen. You know, I was the first candidate in this race to call for the abolishing of ICE. I think it's become a terrorizing agency that's separating and ripping apart families. I think what we saw a couple of weeks ago was shameful, absolutely shameful. We still have 2,500 kids who are being held at different centers across this country and have not been reunited with their parents. I think that this administration, Congress, this president have failed. We need to not just find a path to citizenship for dreamers. We need to find a path to citizenship for TPS holders and also for the 11 million undocumented immigrants who live in this country. And, you know, I've been leading the fight against Trump's racist agenda here in the state, and I will continue that fight if given the opportunity to serve this district in Congress.
Okay. And finally, campaign finance reform.
Let's get it done. Let's get it done. It's a huge obstacle, and it's been such a challenging aspect of my race, and we need more people that are willing and committed to not take PAC money and to get big money out of politics.
Sure. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much,
Appreciate your coming.
Such a pleasure.
Thanks. So you've been listening to an interview with Juana Matias, State Representative for the 16th Essex District. I'm Peggy Wardjulin, a member of Concord Citizens Protecting Progress.